Hello lovelies, in this video we're going to be going through Edexcel B GCSE Geography paper that we've written for 2024. So look at how we've structured everything, look at how we've laid out the answers, what sort of things the examiner might be looking for.
Question 1, Part A. Identify which of these is not a climatic influence on ecosystems for 1 mark. The correct answer here is the first option, geology. Part B. Study Figure 1 in the resource booklet, which is a climatic graph of Lapland. Identify 2 climatic features using Figure 1 for 2 marks. You must ensure in your response that you make use of Figure 1 and make reference to both precipitation and temperature, so 1 feature of each. Starting with temperature, you might identify first of all that throughout the course of the year there is a large range of 15 degrees centigrade. Secondly, you might also notice that there is a clear winter period, with 5 months of the year from November through to March having a temperature of below 0 degrees centigrade. Identifying either of these features would be sufficient to get you the 1 mark for temperature. Moving on now to consider precipitation. You might firstly identify that precipitation is over 100 millimetres for 6 months. The driest months are May and September, with a low of 55 millimetres in September. This then almost doubles the following month in October. Secondly, precipitation is on average higher during the winter months. There is a lull before and after the summer, in May and September. The summer peak of 120 millimetres is lower than the winter peak of 175 millimetres. Identifying either of these features for precipitation would be sufficient to get you the 2nd mark on this question. Part C. State 2 ways that Indigenous communities and the local people have access to resources for 2 marks. Possible responses here might be providing food, medicines from plants and insects, building materials, and fuel resources. Part D. State 1 abiotic feature of a biome for 1 mark. 2 key terms to consider here. First of all, abiotic, which means non-living, and biome, which refers to an area of similar climate or landscape. Possible responses here might therefore include geology or rocks, water, atmosphere, or soil. Part E. Explain the role that an increasing demand for food has on the biosphere for 2 marks. Your response for this question will first need to identify an example and then give supporting detail. Possible responses might include that an increased demand for food means that more land needs to be taken for agriculture, both livestock and crops. Or that it leads to more intensive farming methods being used, such as pesticides to ensure food security. This can then consume all the nutrients in the soil, leading to reduced yields in the future. You might also state that it leads to deforestation and clearing of vegetation and animal habitats. A final possible response might include that an increased demand for food leads to increased demand for meat, which can lead to more cows and the greater production of methane gas, which is harmful to the climate. Question 2, Part A. State 1 feature of taiga for 1 mark. Possible responses here might include coniferous trees, trees with needles, evergreen, and shallow-rooted trees. Part B. Suggest 1 threat to taiga for 1 mark. Possible responses here might include logging for softwood, pulp and paper production, or indirect threats, such as mineral or fossil fuel extraction or hydroelectric power. Part C. Suggest 1 way that plants have adapted to the climate in taiga for 1 mark. Possible responses here might include that there are shallow-rooted trees due to poor soil, that conical-shaped coniferous trees are flexible and let snow slide off, or that needle-like leaves reduce water loss. Part D. Study Figure 2 and Figure 3 in the resource booklet. The rate of tree loss in Lapland has remained largely above 20 kilohectares a year. Explain the potential impact of this deforestation for 4 marks. Figure 2 is a graph showing the loss of tree cover in Lapland in Finland between 2000 and 2022. From this graph, we can observe that in the 7 years between 2016 and 2022, for 6 of those, the tree loss exceeded 30 kilohectares. This was highest in 2022, where tree loss exceeded 35 kilohectares. Figure 3 provides information about tree cover in Lapland, Finland. It says that between 2001 and 2022, the region of Lapland in Finland lost 495 kilohectares of tree cover, equivalent to a 9.3% decrease in tree cover in 21 years. Between 2001 to 2022, the Finland region of Lapland lost 16 kilohectares of tree cover because of forest fires. The year with the most tree cover loss due to fires during this period was 2006, with 3.5 kilohectares lost to fires. This was 12% of all tree cover loss for that year. This information therefore suggests significant loss of tree cover, as well as highlighting the contribution of forest fires to this. Applying the information in Figure 2 and Figure 3 to the question, you should aim to identify at least 2 potential impacts of deforestation and give supporting detail for each. A possible response to this question might read that deforestation has been a factor occurring with all forested areas from tropical rainforest to taiga. Figure 2 shows that for 6 of the 7 years, the rate has been above 30 kilohectares annually. The impact of deforestation has been devastating globally. Trees are carbon stores, and with the clearing of land, the carbon is released back into the atmosphere. With climate change being a major concern globally, this increased amount of carbon dioxide will harm the climate. This is supported by Figure 3, with the number of forest fires and the impact these have on soil as well as greenhouse gases. Soil erosion has become a significant threat within the areas. As the soil is left exposed from the clearing and grass planted, the nutrients within the soil are reduced, and the biodiversity is reduced further. Deforestation also reduces soil stability and can lead to increased land or mudslides, especially after periods of heavy rainfall or snowmelt. Consequently, desertification is a significant threat within the areas. This will impact the indigenous communities within the region, as well as the area's economic development, as productivity of the land will decrease. This answer would fulfill the requirements of a top-level response and be awarded 4 marks, as it identifies potential impacts of deforestation and then gives supporting detail for each one, using the figures provided in the resource booklet. Question 3, Part A. Study Figure 4 and Figure 5 in the resource booklet. Part 1. Calculate how many times bigger power generated by hydroelectric is compared to heat, and give your answer to the nearest whole number for 1 mark. Looking at Figure 4, we can see that hydroelectric power comprises 66% of energy generated, compared to heat, which is 13%. We therefore need to divide 66 by 13, which to the nearest whole number gives us an answer of 5. Part 2. Identify one reason why hydroelectric power is the biggest source of energy, as shown in Figure 4 for 1 mark. There are 3 possible responses to this question, as identified by Figure 5. Firstly, that Finland has so many lakes it is known as the land of the lakes. Secondly, that the government has replaced fossil fuel energy sourced electricity with nuclear and renewables. And thirdly, that the Finnish government is committed to sustainable energy. You therefore just need to select one of those as your answer. Part B. Identify which of these factors does not affect energy supply for 1 mark. The correct answer here is the first option, rising population. Part C. Identify one disadvantage of biofuels as an energy source for 2 marks. To be awarded the 2 marks available here, you first will need to identify a disadvantage and then give supporting detail. Possible responses here might include that burning biomass contributes to carbon emissions, or that the production of biofuels leads to deforestation. In addition, the land to grow crops and biofuels is the same, which puts pressure on the available food. Part D. Explain one environmental impact of mining and drilling for energy resources for 2 marks. To be awarded the 2 marks available here, you first will need to identify an impact and then give supporting detail. Possible responses might include that it leads to landscape scarring, which results in soil erosion and affects other industries, such as foresters, that oil spills might impact fish stocks, that noise pollution from drilling impacts animals, especially those that use sound for navigation, or you could mention carbon emissions. Part E. Explain why international relationships result in countries, such as the UK and Finland, investing in alternative energy resources instead of oil for 2 marks. To achieve full marks on this question, you first will need to identify a reason and then give supporting detail. There are a number of possible reasons that you might identify here. Firstly, you might discuss that countries wish to avoid becoming dependent on other countries for raw materials, as this creates a weakness. For example, many countries are reliant on Russia as one of the world's largest energy producers. Secondly, that a reliance on another country can be problematic if politically the relationship between them is tense. Thirdly, continuing to use Russia as an example, the Russian invasion of Ukraine led the UK government to stop purchasing Russian oil. Prices rose as a result, creating an energy crisis. This heightened the need to find alternative sources of energy. Finally, you might explain the reason that alternative energy requires heavy investment. For example, France has 56 nuclear power plants that cost £500 billion. Countries may therefore team up to share resources and costs. Part F. Suggest 2 methods of energy conservation that can reduce the demand for energy for 4 marks. Your response here needs to identify the 2 different methods and then provide some supporting detail for each. It is important to note here that your response does not need to be connected to the Lapland case study. There are a number of possible methods that you might include in your response. Firstly, you might upgrade and install new light bulbs to reduce consumption. Secondly, you might suggest smart thermostats that can work on mobile devices, allowing homeowners to switch on only when needed. Thirdly, you might consider industry and homeowners switching to better, newer technology with higher rated appliances. Further methods might include the installation of double or triple glazing, as well as properly insulated roofing and water boilers. Finally, you might consider government schemes to put solar panels on roofs to offset energy costs. Part G. Study figures 6, 7 and 8 in the resource booklet. Using evidence from figures 6, 7 and 8, assess the impact of increasing visitor numbers on Lapland's energy resources for 8 marks. To achieve a top-level response on this question, your answer needs to be balanced and detailed, with a well-supported judgment. For this particular question, you need to ensure that your answer focuses on the impact of energy resources from increased tourism. In doing so, you should consider the importance, the severity, and the long-term effects. Figure 6 is a graph showing tourism numbers per million to Finland and Swedish Lapland. You can see from the graph that tourism continues to grow, with Finland being the more popular of the destinations. You should therefore consider the demand that this will place on energy and possible impact on prices. Figure 7 is photographs showing Rovaniemi. In the right-hand photograph, you can see a McDonald's outlet. Rovaniemi is considered to be the capital of Finnish Lapland and is situated on the Arctic Circle. Figure 8 provides information about tourism in Lapland. It tells us that tourism within Lapland contributes to almost 6% of its GDP, higher than any other region in Finland. That tourists visit Lapland all year round, with Santa attractions, husky rides, skiing and other activities available either as a day visitor or longer. Even a McDonald's opened in Rovaniemi in 2013. That Lapland is committed to year-round sustainable tourism and has expanded tourist resources. The flight from the UK to Lapland takes around 3 hours and 30 minutes. The average family of 4 will produce 3.3 tonnes of carbon dioxide from their flight. That mining and mineral extraction in Lapland is worth $4.1 billion in 2020. And that new mining areas are close to tourist destinations. An example being the Kitten mine, which is 40 kilometres from Levi, popular Lapland tourist destination. This information therefore tells us something about the impact of meeting the needs of tourists, such as developing infrastructure and amenities. The growth of mining might also suggest a possible conflict with the tourism industry. A possible response to this question might read that the accessibility of Lapland from the UK has led to a surge in tourist numbers. This means there is a heightened demand for amenities such as heating and hot water, significantly boosting electricity consumption. This can lead to higher prices, which, while potentially benefiting energy providers, may adversely affect the local community by making energy less affordable. On a positive note, the development of energy infrastructure to support tourism can spur local employment, which is a multiplier effect. However, the balance between different industries, like tourism and mining, is delicate. Mining may offer higher wages and attract more investment, but it competes with tourism for resources, potentially creating conflict. The push for increased electricity to support tourism can encourage investment in renewable energy sources, like hydroelectric power. While beneficial for reducing dependency on fossil fuels, this could alter landscapes and displace communities, raising ethical and environmental concerns. Moreover, developing infrastructure to support remote tourist destinations needs extensive construction work, including deforestation and ground disruption, to install utilities like water and power lines. The impermanence of tourism operations poses another risk and means that investment in infrastructure might not yield long-term benefits. Additionally, the seasonal nature of tourism leads to fluctuating energy demands, with peak seasons placing immense pressure on resources, while off-peak periods see underutilisation. Conversely, growth in mining and mineral extraction, driven by larger profits, can boost regional income through taxation and provide a more stable economic base compared to the variable nature of tourism. In conclusion, while the increasing visitor numbers to Lapland offer economic opportunities, they also present challenges for sustainable energy resource management. This answer would demonstrate the requirements of a top-level response, as it identifies a range of different impacts, including positive, negative, immediate, and long-term. The impacts are then supported by detail, both from the information provided in the resource booklet and geographical knowledge. Finally, a clear judgment is reached in relation to the question. Part H. Climate scientists and environmental groups are concerned about the impact on the environment of increasing development in Lapland because of tourism and mining. Explain what is meant by carbon footprint and the potential conflict from development within Lapland for 4 marks. Your response to this question will need to start by defining what is meant by carbon footprint. This will gain you 1 mark. Carbon footprint can be defined as the amount of carbon dioxide released into the atmosphere as a result of human activities, such as driving a car or taking a flight. With carbon footprint defined, the remaining marks come from providing examples with supporting detail of harm posed to the environment by development. Possible responses might include the increase in tourism results in larger carbon footprint from air travel, that seasonal variations in visitors increases carbon footprint at times, and that tourists' increased demand for energy from charging devices, heating holiday lets, etc., which increases carbon footprint. Or finally, that mining involves large amounts of land being cleared, it can affect water quality and pollution levels. Part I. Study Figure 11 in the resource booklet. Using evidence from Figure 11, assess the environmental challenges facing Lapland as it tries to maintain economic development for 8 marks. Figure 11 tells us that temperatures in the Arctic Circle are rising at double the rate of the global average, with Finland's annual mean temperature rising by over 2 degrees centigrade since the mid-19th century. That flooding is becoming more common due to the increased rainfall. Pori in the southwest of Finland is the most at risk of flooding, and Rovaniemi, the so-called capital of Lapland, the second most at risk. Among the Sami, the indigenous population of the region, only 10% are still reindeer herders or owners. Reindeer struggle with the unpredictable weather patterns, especially with rain replacing snow during the coldest months. The rain forms ice on the ground. This causes some reindeer to struggle to graze on the lichen and rely on feed. Some reindeer have travelled as far as 100 kilometres to the south in search of food. The Sami have to feed them with hay and other supplements in the winter to avoid this movement. But the mining spotlight is now focused on Lapland, with the retreating ice in the Arctic Circle exposing new billion-dollar quantities of precious minerals. That mining and mineral extraction displaces the local communities and blocks traditional herding routes. And that the GDP of Finland includes 3% from tourism, with Lapland being the biggest contributor, and mining and mineral extractions contributes to around 0.3% of GDP. However, when considering production directly and indirectly, including construction, it is around 40%. In order to achieve a top-level response on this question, your answer needs to be balanced and developed with a supported judgment. Possible points that you may include in your answer regarding the environmental challenges includes the growth of tourism and the energy demands that this causes, including the increased carbon footprint from air travel. You might also highlight that there are limited opportunities development due to the remote location of Lapland. You could also consider that new industries such as mining pay higher wages than traditional industries such as reindeer herding. Further points might relate to mining, the impact this has on the landscape and on ecosystems, as well as its bigger contribution to Finland's GDP. Finally, you might consider the move towards renewable energy, the impact on landscape and communities that this has. A possible response to this question might read that Lapland faces significant environmental challenges as it tries to maintain economic development. The region's reliance on air travel for tourism significantly contributes to carbon emissions, with a single family trip generating 3.3 tonnes of carbon dioxide. Tourist demands for amenities like heating and hot water also drive up electricity usage, necessitating further energy production. While new industries offer higher wages than traditional sectors like reindeer herding, they also bring environmental drawbacks. The conflict between the tourism industry and more lucrative mining operations demonstrates this tension. Mining not only scars the landscape visually, but also poses substantial risks to local ecosystems, such as habitat disruption and pollution from explosive used in extraction processes. Moreover, the drive to increase electricity supply through investments in hydroelectric and other renewable sources can alter landscapes and displace communities. While renewable energy development is generally viewed more favourably by younger generations, it can still spark conflict with residents resistant to change and concerned about the environmental impact. Despite mining's significant contribution to GDP and its higher wage offerings, its environmental footprint is large, involving extensive land alteration and potential wildlife disruption. Lapland's challenge is to encourage economic growth while minimising environmental harm, ensuring that development is sustainable and considerate of the differing needs and views of the community. This answer demonstrates the requirements of a top-level response, as different challenges are identified, with supporting information provided that is linked to the question. Finally, a supported judgment is also reached. Question 4. Study the 3 options below for Finland. Select the option that offers the best future for Finland's people and its environment. Option 1. is to focus on developing renewable energy on a large scale to sell energy beyond Finland. Option 2 is to focus on developing mining and mineral extractions in Lapland and further into the Arctic Circle. And option 3 is to focus on developing sustainable tourism in Lapland. You need to justify your choice. Use information from the resource booklet and knowledge and understanding from the rest of your geography course to support your answer, for 8 marks, plus 4 marks available for spelling, punctuation, grammar, and your use of specialist terminology. A top-level response to this answer will need to be balanced and developed with a supported judgment. In order to justify your choice, you must consider all 3 options in your answer, and then establish a clear argument for the one you have chosen. In your response, you will need to consider defining what is meant by the best future for Finland's people and its environment. It is important to note here that the mark scheme does not suggest a preferred option. This means that all options can be justified. There are a number of points that you could validly apply to all the options. Firstly, that the economic benefits for all are both domestic and in terms of export sales. Secondly, that each of the options will require infrastructure to be developed, which can be expensive. Thirdly, that development may lead to conflict with indigenous communities and neighbouring countries. And finally, that the issue of forest fires should be considered for each of the 3 options, and the need to develop environmental policies to protect. Option 1 is to focus on developing renewable energy on a large scale to sell energy beyond Finland. If you have selected this as your preferred option, there are a number of points which you could make to justify your choice. Firstly, that developing renewable energy is a progressive action that helps the environment. In this, Finland is already leading the way with renewable energy and is well placed to develop new technology. As the ice continues to melt, more water will be provided for hydro energy. Finally, that developing renewable energy to sell beyond Finland will bring economic gains, enhancing Finland's international reputation and bringing energy security. Option 2 is to focus on developing mining and mineral extractions in Lapland and further into the Arctic Circle. If you have chosen option 2, then you could justify this by arguing that it would be hard to replace income Finland already gains from mining and mineral extraction, with the potential to expand this further. In addition, the economic benefits likely to result could be reinvested to negate potential negative impacts, such as the environmental impact on water quality. However, in weighing up this option, you might want to consider the likely effect that it would have on the traditional way of life of the Sami people and reindeer herding. You might also consider that the costs involved in mining and mineral extractions would mean that other regions would likely face a lack of long-term investment. Furthermore, these industries can have boom and bust periods, which might lead to unemployment. And finally, that developing such operations goes against the commitment of the Finnish government to developing sustainable energy. Option 3 is to focus on developing sustainable tourism in Lapland. If you have selected this option, then you might justify it by saying that tourism already is increasing in numbers in Lapland and the infrastructure already exists. You might also argue for the employment opportunities that tourism provides, which are year-round and at different skill levels, although you might want to consider that tourism can have boom and bust periods. In addition, developing sustainable tourism means that traditional ways of life are protected, as reindeer farmers can diversify to provide tourist rides, for example. There are also the arguments that if Finland does not continue to develop Lapland, then the other Arctic areas, such as Swedish Lapland, will benefit. And that finally, with the threat of climate change, there is the need to develop beyond traditional industries.
Ouch! This is why in some videos I explain scratches.